There, Zoe again. Welcome to February. Yes, our first month of the year is done and dusted. How exciting. Also done and dusted is the Kickstarter campaign for Olympus Dawn. Late pledges are still enabled for a couple of things, the ebooks, audiobooks, and paperbacks. So if you missed out and you're only just becoming aware of what's going on, grab yourself the finale of the Gaia series for a special deal at Kickstarter. The link is in the show notes. So let me tell you about the question for this week is, are you ready for the demographic pressure of aging population at work? Chances are no, which is why we have a fabulous guest this week, Dan Pontefract. Let me tell you all about him. Let's get into it. Well, my guest, Dan Pontefract, is a leadership expert and corporate culture strategist. He is also an amazing author, has multiple award-winning books. He has had a range of senior roles leading change in large organizations across Canada. And he's a fellow Canadian, which is awesome. And he's actually been to Australia quite a few times and loves it here. Good choice. And his latest book is The Future of Work is Grey. And in it, he expounds on all the challenges that we face as our population ages, particularly when it comes to the workforce, and the opportunities that there are there for organizations and individual workers as we reconfigure and rethink what it means to be an older person in the workplace and what opportunities there are. So without further ado, here's Dan. All the way from Victoria, British Columbia. Welcome to the show again, Dan Pontefract.
I'm a return customer and a big loyal friend and fan. So thank you, Zoe.
Well, it's good to have you on the show again, especially after this latest book that you've just put out, which I snapped up as soon as you offered as a preview copy. I'm like, yes, please. The Future of Work is Grey. And I'm like, we're in the same kind of stage of life and facing the similar realities, and the whole idea of, what are we going to do about this aging workforce and what it means for society? And the first half of the book, as you call it, side one, or side A, as in the old vinyl records, it's got all the woes of the world in it. So Dan, tell me, okay, let's set the scene for everybody listening. And our listeners, primarily if you are in the 50 plus category, this is highly relevant to you. Or if you are in charge of a workforce that is struggling to get people in through the door, this is also relevant to you. And if you're younger than that, this is the future that you're facing as well. So how bad is it? What does the low population rate actually mean for social devastation and societal collapse?
What a way to start. Go in with a bang, not out with a bang. First of all, thanks again. It's great to be here and to riff a little bit on this piece of research that I did. So the future of work, you could say, is gray. Why? Because to your point, Zoe, we're in an inevitable situation demographically, first and foremost. I'll get to a couple other little points quickly, but let's just say that we used to think that there was a playbook of how organizations and society indeed actually evolved. We would have babies, and then it just replenished. And no one really thought about it for the most part. It's like, we have our 2 kids, 3 kids, maybe sometimes 4 or 5, the crazy ones. And then no one really thought about the math. But then the math caught up with us, and people now, I hope, possibly, maybe because of this book, but people are like, oh, wait, what? Like there's less people? What? I don't understand. So here's the crux of it. If we want society to remain, from a population perspective, the same as we've always kind of known it for the last 30, 40 years, every woman would have to have 2.1 babies. And that has not been happening for a while. And 2.1 means because obviously there's disease, there's accidents, like some people die. But men can't have babies, so women have to have 2.1 babies for us to replace ourselves. That is, the 2 men and women that make the baby. Okay, so that's the demographic part. So for the last 40, 50 years or so, it's been declining. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, everywhere. And the numbers are kind of crazy. So if I give you the 2.1 number as that's the baseline to replace us, Here's some for you. Australia's current fertility rate is what the technical term is 1.5 babies per woman. So that's 0.6 less than what's needed to replenish Australia's population. New Zealand's 1.56, but again, it's worse than other Commonwealth countries. England is 1.4. Canada is 1.2.
Oh, really?
And then if you look sort of north to you a little bit, Japan is 1.0.
Oh.
And South Korea is 0.75.
So I don't know how the maths of this works. So if in Japan, if it's 1.0, does that mean they're losing a person out of, like, so if there's two people and eventually they're going to have half the amount of the population? Is it 50% loss of population? Is that what it means?
Exactly.
Over a generation?
Exactly. And so what's happening right today is that because we weren't really paying attention, our eyes were not on the Aussie rules football, if you will. What's happening is the organizations will eventually, like we're talking in the next 3, 4, 5 years, start running out of younger people. And the second part of what I call age debt is that, I mean, this is a yay part for you and me, Zoe, but we're living longer. So longevity is a good thing, i.e. we're getting to live longer. But one of the bad parts of age debt is that we haven't saved enough money.
Yeah.
So what's happening? Organizations are having to deal with a few things, and people like us, you and I, are having to deal with a few things. We're not having enough young people enter our workforce. There's just not that many, even with immigration. So organizations, by virtue of needing to have people to, work with them and for them, are going to have to start thinking about the makeup of the organization from a demographic perspective. It's just math. So there will have to be certainly less young people to be thinking about, sadly, because there's just not enough of them. But there have to be more middle-aged and older workers. And there have to be more middle-aged and older workers, not just because the organizations need them, i.e. because they'll need bodies to do stuff, but because they have to work because they haven't saved enough, because they haven't figured out that they are going to live longer and they might have to work into their 60s, 70s, and 80s. So this is I call it the demographic apocalypse that no one's really paying attention to. But then you've got other bits. So in the organizations, because we're firing and letting go of a lot more older workers, that we're not seeing the forest through the trees. And so we're losing experience in our organizations. Wisdom is just walking out the door. And we're like, what happened? Sally used to run payroll. How come we don't know how to run payroll anymore? No one transferred the wisdom with Sally gone now. Oh, no. And then ageism. We've got just reams and heaps, if you're Australian, of data that shows how we're ageist in the ways in which that we're hiring or not hiring. So this whole side A that you lovely unpacked for me and said, teed it up, that's the big problem. Demographics, experience, longevity, and ageism.
Actually, I think it's also nestled in a even bigger, broader perspective. So aging population, people have different needs. And so your scenario, we need older people to stay in the workforce longer to A, to pay for themselves, and B, because there aren't any younger workers, also assumes that the commercial environment remains the same. And it probably won't be, because older people have different needs and interests, etc., different spending patterns. And if there's fewer people spending money, that means the whole nature of business and commerce is likely to change as well.
There may be a follow-up book that I'm noodling with, which is called "The Future of Work is Degrowth."
Oh my God! Thank God that we're talking about that, because that whole concept that growth is good, and this has been our default meta language as a Western culture, Western societies for several generations, hundreds of years, that growth is good, and we always report on growth, and it's like, well, degrowth is perhaps the future. And it's not because we think it's going to be better. It's because there isn't an option, because there's fewer people around.
This is exactly it. And so What I don't think many organizations, certainly OECD, certainly those that head over to Davos every winter, I don't think they see the fact that if they're not thinking about the long-term implications of these short-term demographic issues, then there will be a sort of a revectoring of what capitalism means in the very short future. So this definitely is something that organizations should be thinking about. I'll give you a crazy stat or anecdote, I guess. So in 2024, in Japan, remember that data point I suggested that they're way ahead of the demographic demise, if you will.
Yeah.
In 2024, for the first time ever, companies sold more adult diapers than baby diapers. And so you start thinking about that. That sort of makes your head shake, right? And you're like, huh. So what happened to the baby diaper companies? Well, if that's happening to baby diaper companies, and in this particular case, obviously they probably shifted their manufacturing to creating more adult diapers. But the point being is that, well, if there are less baby diapers to make, then that means there are going to be less people to buy stuff soon enough in the near future. I mean, we're talking near future, 30 to 50 years. But if a company wants to survive, they got to start thinking this way.
I agree. And people aren't.
They are not.
One of my questions for you is like, this is a huge societal challenge. So we've got some problems going against us in both government and industry organizations as well. Government, because of the election cycles are so short, it's hard to have a long-term focus unless you're in a dictatorship like China, which has been addressing its population apocalypse after its one-child policy went, oh, hang on a minute. We actually need some women to help us function in society. So they're trying to redress some of the unwanted side effects of their one-child policy, which was put in place to avoid overpopulation of all things. So we've got short-term government issues, and then we've got in our own business sectors, how do we get people to think more broadly when things are so urgent and chaotic now? And I think, this is one of the things that gets in the way of organizations doing this big picture work, I think. What else gets in the way of us buckling down and addressing these age apocalypse issues?
I'd argue shareholder primacy theory, which is also sort of profit theory, right? It's that the short-termism that you point out with the election cycles and with politics and politicians is actually the same thing to a degree, but different in organizations, i.e., if organizations are set up such that their modus operandi is to one of two things. If they're publicly traded, to play around with the stock market so that they can reap more dollars, if you will, from stock pricing. That's a whole other incentivization plan that senior executives and others within that firm, including the board, are using and manipulating so that they reap the benefits in the short term. So those include things like share buybacks. Those include situations that they're basically playing with the stock price because the analysts say you want this amount of revenue at this profitability. So the whole organization scurries around the idea of, well, how do we improve our profitability so we can improve the stock price? And only a few benefit from that sort of game. On the profit side, if an organization isn't publicly traded, but is only thinking about earnings and not the longer term future, i.e., serving all stakeholders rather than just profit holders, then again, there's an issue there by not thinking about the demographic implications. They're not thinking about their grandchildren's future. And I know we're getting quite philosophical, esoteric, and highfalutin, if you will. But that's part of what I think leadership responsibility is. And it's this day and age, like when it's 2026 looking out to 2050, when the math is mathing like this demographically, we need to be doing a rethink. Now, another thing you think about is governments, back to that. Well, pension cycles. So if Australia's national pension plan, like Canada's, called CPP, Canada Pension Plan, what happens when there are less people feeding in from a tax infrastructure perspective into that pension pool.
Oh, we go broke. It's basically
Precisely.
what happens.
So who's thinking about this? And so again, whether you're a politician or whether you're a leader in the corporate world or whether you're in academia, quite frankly, where's another one we should get to is academia. That's kind of where the grown-ups have to start having these longer term conversations about, all right, yeah, well, what's in it for the next 25, 30 years, given we've got, as I mentioned in the book, the bell to bulb scenario population wise, where we have the usual bell of where population curves went to the bulb, which if you think about a light bulb, less people in the base and more people that are up at the hub at the top.
Eventually will it even out? Like once us older folks are dead, will it balance out, do you think? Unless the population, if we go back to replacement levels, that's basically how we're going to get out of the bulb, is if population comes back to replacement levels. Is that correct?
Eventually, I mean, at the end of the day, we'll see. So at the end of the day being at the end of the next 50 to 75 year cycle, if things go the same way that they're going, which is basically a replacement rate of 1.0, it takes a long time for humanity to extinguish itself. But what we're trying to think about here is ways in which that I guess commerce and business and government and academia, how can that replenish itself without human beings? So there's a whole other kettle of fish to open up here, which is, okay, so how do we use technology, AI, innovation in order to supplant some of the things that we have been used to doing as humans, because maybe we don't need the humans to do that. For example, in Japan, back there, because I did some research in Japan and South Korea and parts of Europe for this particular book, they realized that they're running out of truckers or truck drivers. And so their average age of truck drivers are something like 49 or 50. It's like no one wants to be a truck driver. And so what they're thinking about is building these sort of high-speed rail shipping lanes. And so in between like Tokyo and Osaka or Osaka and wherever, it doesn't really matter, they're thinking, okay, so how do we ship goods fast in between our major centers that doesn't require trucks or boats or airlines? And so again, they're thinking longer term. So, okay, well, if we don't have a population explosion, which they won't, and we're not going to increase immigration, which they aren't, what are some innovative ways for us to think about a new, different world that is coming for us fast?
This is where my sci-fi brain projects into the future. It's all about automation and robotics, where you have a mostly robotic or community or society around you propping up these few flesh bags. Ultimately, they will die out. You do actually need some humans to be part of the whole ecosystem that we've established. One of the pieces of research I did for my Mars book, Olympus Dawn, which is coming out soon, which is how many people do you actually need for a self-sustaining community on another planet? But you could replace other planet for anywhere, if you like, a self-contained. Okay. And it was 150,000 people, to have enough people of able-bodied people to do the labor required, even with robots and stuff.
Oh, interesting.
Supervise agricultural production and food processing and environmental stabilization, all that kind of stuff, like the jobs required to keep a group of people alive. 150,000 people is a lot of people.
Yeah.
Well, if you're thinking about Mars, getting 150,000 people to Mars is a lot. Just to create a self-sustaining place. So it is an interesting future that we do face. And I know there is a lot of innovation happening around, like, okay, so we're going to need people who don't want to do manual labor jobs anymore. A, because there's fewer of them. B, because there's other choices people can make. So let's get the robots doing stuff. But I feel like it's a little bit of a Band-Aid solution, which is part of one of the reasons why you're talking about this. It's like, let's start thinking about these things so that we can make different decisions around it. And it's such a big systemic issue, right? So why do people have less babies is because of the cost of living pressure is quite difficult. that and also the opportunities for women have expanded. And a lot of them are delaying childbearing, which often means to childlessness because, oops, they're too old and their biology doesn't kick in effectively.
Yep.
Or they consciously don't want to have children anyway because they prefer a life of opportunity as opposed to that does not include motherhood. So all these factors are at play there. So it's quite a massive systemic change that we need to address. And degrowth is one of the values propositions that's there. And something around family is probably part of the new world order value system that we need to reintegrate. Now, are we veering too off track to the future of work is gray?
Not at all. It's all related. That's the thing. I mean, when you alluded to why we're not having as many babies, you're spot on, Zoe. One of the other things is these are like good news reports, right? Teen pregnancies have been like shelved or it's been halved since the 1980s. So whether it's Australia, New Zealand, Commonwealth countries, there's 50% less teenage pregnancies. Like that's a good thing. But it's not helping the demographic decline because all of a sudden now we don't, well, you know what I mean, right? Like, so there's less babies being born by teens, which is negatively affecting the actual population of our countries. But then with more opportunities for women has done exactly as you've said. It's delayed or absolutely extinguished them from having a baby. And that's why you see, thirdly, the cost of living being one of those huge factors. And that we can't lose sight of either. That's a result, a negative result of what we've done to young people in terms of what it's like to be an adult. So in 3 different cities, in Berlin, in Toronto, and in Manchester, the average time to save for a normal house, like a standalone house, averages of those 3 cities, 16 years for the down payment. So that wasn't what it was like for you and I. You and I are of the same vintage, as you alluded to, and we are. And it's not the same anymore. So the wages have not kept up with the cost of living. And so young people these days are like, well, how the heck am I going to have one child, let alone 2 or 3, which is why, again, birth rates have plummeted. And we are trying to live and work in our organizations the same way as we did modeled in the 70s and 80s. And like I keep saying, the math doesn't math. So
Yeah, and we don't change our systems and organizations to make it easier for families to operate. That we've been hanging around about that for at least 10 plus years, about how unfamily friendly different work systems are. And now it's like, well, if we want people to have babies societally, then maybe let's try and make it a little bit easier for them.
Agreed. So like there's some hope. So halfway through the book, spoiler alert. The book title changes halfway through the book, and instead of the future of work is gray, it becomes the future of work is gold, which is paying homage to the color of the book cover itself. And why I switched to golden is that, I'm not hopeless. I'm hopeful. But at the same time, that means we've got to do things differently, to your point. So as an example, just like rhyming some stuff off the top of my head, there are organizations nowadays that instead of just having parental leave, have grandparental leave. Now, as a 50, almost 55-year-old, I'm incentivized at this particular point in my life. I'm thinking, you know what? In about 10 years, I think I'm going to probably be a grandparent. I would love sort of 1 month or 2 month grandparental leave as part of my package. I think that's fantastic. So organizations that are thinking that way are, again, thinking ahead. And now they're basically opening up the possibility for older workers, who I call Rubies, to maybe want to work for them. I know organizations like BMW have sort of talent shift programs. So I'll give you what BMW does. They look at directors and VPs and they say, look, you're in your 50s, maybe your 60s. We love your work. We're going to pay you the same, but we'd like you to step down from your director or VP role We want you to act as sort of a coach, a conciliary to the person that we want to promote from within. And that individual is usually a middle-aged rock, as I call them. And so the rocks turn into these senior leaders, where that Ruby, who is the senior leader to begin with, stays at the company, but now becomes an individual contributor. And I think they've done this now like 50 or 60 times. I think that's just wonderful for them to say, you know what, we want older workers to stick around because they've got wisdom and we love them and we want them still to contribute. But they don't have to be the senior leader. They can be the individual contributor like they started out when they were younger.
Yeah.
So I do think that there are companies that are rethinking things. It's just that they don't surface all that often because we're still stuck, as you pointed out, in kind of our antiquated, archaic models.
There's so much to unpack around that. And as I'm thinking about the organizations I work with, if our Rubies, our older, established, seasoned leaders, get asked to step aside, the ego resistance to losing power and authority is tremendous and would be difficult for them to overcome unless we turn that stepping aside thing into a massive status and reward situation. You actually get paid more, not just the same, to step aside to do the mentoring and guiding role. People have huge identity shifts around that's required. So it needs careful coaching and support for people to be able to handle that emotionally and ego definitionally. Totally not a word, but understand what I mean. How to redefine themselves as professionals if they're no longer in charge, but mentoring. That change is quite a big one. It's like the earlier big shift you go from being a worker to being a leader, that other really critical career shift when you have to change identity from being a contributor to being in charge of people and how you lose all your friends who are your peers. I think it's equal in terms of trauma that it can cause. So while I think structurally it's a really helpful way to think about this, the kind of matrix moves as you put in your book, I think there's some ego support work and value systems to emphasize and to reframe through the organization. I don't think it's as easy as just saying, oh, here's the solution in terms of tactics. It's a whole web, an adaptive change, if you like, that's required.
Well, and an organization like L'Oreal has taken a look at their demographics as well. And they're like, wait a second, we should be hiring more older people, women and men. And so they didn't do it word for word, but essentially they shifted from thinking about careers as a ladder to what I call careers as a canvas. And so they have opportunities that are kind of gigs. So they allow older workers to come in on contracts, on gigs. They shift people around. They move them around different countries and say, hey, can we learn from you? Can you go to America? Can you go to France? Can you go to the UK? And they do these kind of 6-month stints, these rotations. And that's, again, another way in which to incentivize people not just to work at your company, but to stay and to show how you are transferring wisdom and knowledge, et cetera, around an organization. So that's one of my big beefs, is that we're still stuck on the career ladder when we got to rethink how careers actually manifest, given the fact that our demographics are changing. So there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, someone went to another company and then you're like, why don't you come back? We'd love to have you back. So many companies are like, once you're gone, you're out, you're never coming back. I think we need to be thinking about boomerangs, as I call them. I think we need to allow older people to have time off. And then they're like, yeah, we'd love to come back. Or thinking about a phased out approach, meaning, okay, I'd like to retire in 5 years. Can I work 80%, 60%, 40%, 20% over those next 5 years? No one's doing that. But why not? Like, that's a way in which to still get talent that is older, the Rubies, in your organization for a longer period of time. And not only do you help your productivity through that portional type of work, again, that individual is hopefully shepherding coaching and mentoring sessions with younger rocks and rivers ultimately in your org.
I agree with you. I love this part of your book where you throw out the ladder and bring in the career canvas. Like, that complete change of metaphor when we're looking at careers is is really helpful. And I love the canvas just sounds so creative, and it's got soft edges to it as opposed to even a matrix or the ladder, which is linear, that one-way trajectory. And a lot of people aren't interested anyway in climbing the ladder and getting more senior. There's other ways to grow and expand and evolve. I think that's beautiful. And the use of metaphor like that is one of the ways where you can slip in these new value systems to help people rethink about what is career. Now, I'm mindful we haven't explained what is a river. You've talked about rocks and rubies. Can you just run us through rivers, rocks, and rubies so people listening can understand that a little bit more?
Good catch. So I am against generations in the workforce. I think the tropes and memes that come with that just do such disservice to everyone around. Because what some arbitrary 14 or 15 year segment doesn't mean anything these days. It just hurts. You can have your fun on TikTok or whatever outside in the world that is society. But in the organization, you and I, everybody go through 3 eras, as I say, rivers, rocks, and rubies. Yeah. Rivers is simply your fluid intelligence era. That's when you're younger, whatever your age is. You're 16 to some age. And then you enter whatever your middle age is, right? And that you could be 25 through to 55, who knows? But it's the rock era. And that's when you are ultimately really figuring yourself out. You could be a leader. You don't have to be a leader, but you're steadfast. You're confident, right? You've been through your river era and you've kind of figured out who you are and what you're really good at. And then when you enter in the older part of your career, we all enter our Ruby era. In the Ruby era, you might be still working in the same role, the same company, but now you're just flowing with wisdom because you've been through 4 reorgs. You've been through 7 once-in-a-generation crises, right? You've seen it all. And so whether you're 45, 55, 65, 85, 95, your Ruby era shows that you've got that wisdom from previous experiences and you can help in different ways than you couldn't when you were a river or a rock.
I think subject to that also, or in line with that, is that at each of those different stages, we're playing different games. And totally. I don't think this is very acknowledged in organizations. I think the assumption is that everybody's playing the same game, which is to be top performers climbing the ladder. So we've got the metaphor of the ladder and everybody's driving towards producing and production. And it's not the case. Rivers have got a different kind of game. And I was talking to my nephew. He's kind of on the verge of river rock. He's soaking up experience and trying to learn. So he's showing up as a learner, as a contributor, and he's playing that game. How can I demonstrate value? How can I learn more? How can I grow? And the game of the rock is different. It's you're perhaps an authority or not, and you're delivering. And it's a different kind of game than the Ruby, who has delivered, climbed a few mountains, as you said, seen a lot of angst, been through a lot of angst, and has kind of a different mindset about achievement. If you're growing and progressing, you might also be looking to the time where you dial back your time in the office or the work that you're doing to have more of a canvas outside of work, if you like. And so we're looking towards what's in my bank account. Have I got enough to retire? There's different conversations, different games, different responsibilities, but what we don't have in the workplace is conversations about that.
We don't.
It's more.
That's exactly it. And so one of the ideas I have is called the longevity lens, and that longevity lens is these conversations that organizations really have to be having at different points of our eras. So, to your point, like, why are we having sort of financial planning conversations with rivers these days and letting them know that they're going to live to 90 or 100, like able-bodiedly. And if they're not planning financially and emotionally and socially for a very long life, then I do think that our organizations have a responsibility to help them see, like, there's a long path ahead. So similarly, when the rocks who are, whether you're female going through menopause, or you are in the middle sandwich between raising young kids, and maybe you have older parents that are, having a tough go with some sort of ailment, whatever that may be. Middle-aged rock leaders, non-leaders who are women or men, having to be in the middle between these two ends, plus keep it together at work. I mean, that's where you see the highest rising level of burnout is our middle-aged rocks. And so again, if our organizations aren't thinking about longevity lens, and longevity in this case is thinking about their two ends of the dads and moms they're supporting and the kids they're raising and the jobs they're fulfilling, that's a big burden. And anyway, if we're not doing these types of things, Zoe, then I think, again, it's there's an imprudent missing link there for our organizations. I think we can do better.
I think we can too. And I think one of the things we can start doing is stop thinking as organizations, as entities unto themselves. I mean, what are organizations but people collaborating to produce outcomes for others and everything? What are people doing to look after each other in service to others? Then it gets a little bit more real. And so these conversations about what could be seen as nice to have, value adds, let's offer our younger people some financial planning skills, is like, well, no, it's not just a nice to have. It actually should be an integral part of our workforce management plan. So all you HR people out there, all you leaders who have some form of authority, pay attention. These are things that you can implement right now. And I think Dan's book, your book is really essential for this. And I think leaders would be well serviced to pick up a copy and run through it. And it's not often that I say, go and get this book, but I'm saying go and get this book. Now, changing track.
Yeah.
Dan, are you ready for the Fast 3?
Oh, how can I not be? I mean, the setup is amazing. Let's go for it.
And I don't know why I ask if they're ready, because I always just throw them in there anyway. Okay, number 1, what is the future technology you most want right now?
I actually want a taxi that will get me somewhere safely, not on the ground. I.e., I want hovering taxis that are ideally safely controlled, but I'm tired of traffic. Like, I'm tired of being in big cities and I don't use Ubers. I always use taxis. So I like supporting local economies. So I'd like local taxis that are hovering above all the rest of the traffic to get me to where I got to go when I'm traveling.
Yeah, travel seems to be the number one point of friction from all the guests I have on. It's like it's such a drama. Okay.
Well, I travel a lot, so I mean, that's one of my it's my itches to scratch.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, number 2, best tip you ever got for leadership.
Don't take advice from people who have already made it.
Tell me more.
Well, the idea there is, because I love irony. I mean, I love antithetical thinking is probably more specific. But when you're not taking advice from people who've already made it, what you want is the people who are on their way up or on their way doing something different. Because when they're already at the top, there's an ego that basically is there. He's like, well, you should do it my way. You should do it this way. And so the advice I got was pay attention to those that are still on the ground and figuring it out. Pay attention to those who are on the way to something. Pay attention to those who have lost it all and then are figuring it out again. You learn a lot more when there's friction and sandpaper than from people who have, quote, made it. And I was like, oh, that's quite good. So that stuck with me. Cool.
That'll stick with me now too. Thanks. And number 3, what are you reading or listening to right now?
I'm rereading. It's been about 5 years. It's Richard Rummelt's Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, a book I highly recommend. It must be 40 years old now. But Good Strategy, Bad Strategy is sort of his take on strategy. But he does a great job about how strategy is everywhere. It could be in universities, healthcare, CPG. He goes into all these examples, but it's not about slogans. It's not about, it's more about what you're trying to do and how to get there. I think it's just a brilliant way to say, for me at least, it's like, this is how you illuminate this hidden brilliance to get you to where it is that you're trying to go as an organization. So everybody is involved. It's a really good book. So highly recommend.
Okay.
Richard Rummelt.
Rummelt. How do you spell the last name?
Rumelt.
Rummelt. Okay. Can I read my own writing? Rummelt. Okay. Love it. Dan, this has been fantastic. Before we wrap up, is there anything you would, any question you'd like to answer that I haven't asked yet?
I guess one of the questions that you could ask me is, Dan, do you feel hopeful?
Dan, do you feel hopeful?
I do. I do think that there is a lot to look forward to in a world where we are demographically changing. So whether that is the environment, I think, there are some good things happening if population does decline. But I think there's other ways in which I think we'll see communities come together over the next 10 to 20 years. I think we lost sight a little bit of what it means to have community. And I think we went on this big globalization path, and it's not I'm anti-global, but I am pro-community. And I think you're going to see communities come together far more than we've ever thought about in the next 10 years, when our current rivers, who are the Gen Alphas and Gen Zs, are coming up and becoming their own rocks. And I do believe that because of that, so not anti-globalization, but pro forma social learning of each other, I think you're going to see them and us all come together face to face a little more, in fact, a lot more than we have over the last couple decades.
I love it. That's a great, hopeful message to end on. Dan, this has been great. It's been fabulous reconnecting with you. I loved your new book. Highly recommend it. The Future of Work is great. Grab yourself a copy. It's awesome. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
Pretty easy. If you're of the Queen's English, you can go to thefutureofworkisgray.com. If you're American for some reason.
EY.
Yeah, if you're American, the other one works too. Thefutureofworkisgray.com. That takes you to my site and the book site, obviously directly.
Okay, fantastic. Dan, you're awesome. Thank you. Wasn't that incredible? That was a fascinating conversation. The book is terrific. I highly recommend it. Every leader, I think, who's in charge of recruitment or adjacent to recruitment and has got employment challenges, either as an employer or as an employee, then you ought to read this book. There's plenty of opportunities after the tsunami of challenges to explore in it. Don't forget that Olympus Dawn, you can still grab a copy with the late pledges enabled for this week. Your copy of the finale of the Gaia series, my sci-fi epic that explores the big questions of what kind of leadership and future we want for the world in a really amazing, fast-paced techno thriller form. So it's a good read, as well as one that asks big questions. The link is in the show notes, and that's the Kickstarter for Olympus Dawn. Don't forget to also drop a comment or a question on the Substack page to explore what you are thinking or what you are experiencing through this change of workforce. What does retirement mean to you, if it does mean anything to you? What you are looking at in terms of late career and what kind of roles and opportunities you would like to explore. All right, in the meantime, live with grace, lead in service, live well, lead well.